Hey there, listening squirrels. There's not much more of the story left, but we'll go ahead and finish it out, and I'm going to start on the next story by Harriet Beecher Stowe. And I'll probably go over some of what I read before. There's folks with them, added Rhodey. Lots of them. I see 2 big sleighs chock full, shouted Seth, peering through the dusk. It looks like a cemetery, Semintery. Guess Grandma's dead and come up here to be buried, said Saul in a solemn tone. This startling suggestion made Tilly, Prue, and F hasten to look out, full of dismay at such an ending of their festival. If that's a funeral, the mourners are uncommonly jolly, said F dryly, as merry voices and loud laughter broke the white silence without. I see Aunt Cynthia and Cousin Hetty, and there's Mose and Amos. I do declare Pa's bringing 'em all home to have some fun here, cried Prue, as she recognized one familiar face after another. Oh, my patience, ain't I glad I got dinner, and don't I hope it'll turn out good, exclaimed Tilly, while the twins pranced with delight and the small boys roared, Hooray for Pa! Hooray for Thanksgiving! The cheer was answered heartily, and in came father, mother, baby, aunts, and cousins, all in great spirits, and all much surprised to find such a festive welcome awaiting them. Ain't Grandma dead at all? Asked Saul in the midst of the kissing and handshaking. Bless your heart, no. It was all a mistake of old Mr. Chadwick's. He's as deaf as an adder. And when Mrs. Brooks told him Mother was mending fast, and she wanted me to come down today, certain sure he got the message all wrong and give it to the first person, passing in such a way as to scare me most to death and send us down in a hurry. Mother was sitting up as chirk as you please, and dreadful sorry you didn't all come. So, to keep the house quiet for her and give you a taste of the fun, your pa fetched us all up to spend the evening, and we're going to have a jolly time. "Ought to hedge by the looks of things," said Aunt Cynthia, briskly finishing the tale, when Mrs. Bassett paused for want of breath. "What in the world put it into your head we was coming, and set you to getting up such a supper?" asked Mr. Bassett, looking about him well pleased, and much surprised at the plentiful table. Tilly modestly begun to tell, but the others broke in and sang her praises in a sort of chorus, in which bears, pigs, pies, and oranges were oddly mixed. Great satisfaction was expressed by all, and Tilly and Prue were so elated by the commendation of Ma and the aunts that they set forth their dinner, sure everything was perfect. But when the eating began, which it did the moment wraps were off, then their pride got a fall. For the first person who tasted the stuffing, it was big cousin Mose, and that made it harder to bear, nearly choked over the bitter morsel. "Tilly Bassett, whatever made you put wormwood and catnip in your stuffing?" demanded Ma, trying not to be severe, for all the rest were laughing and Tilly looked ready to cry. "I did it," said Prue, nobly taking all the blame, which caused Pa to kiss her on the spot and declare that it didn't do a mite of harm, for the turkey was all right. "I never see onions cooked better. All the vegetables is well done, and the dinner a credit to you, my dears," declared Aunt Cynthia, with her mouth full of fragrant vegetables she praised. The pudding was an utter failure, in spite of the blazing brandy in which it lay, as hard and as heavy as one of the stone balls on Squire Duncan's great gate. It was speedily whisked out of sight, and all fell upon the pies, which were perfect. I thought they were ruined. But Tilly and Prue were much depressed and didn't recover their spirits till dinner was over and the evening fun well under way. Blind Man's Bluff, Hunt the Slipper, Come Philanderer, and other lively games soon set everyone bubbling over with jollity. And when F struck up Money Musk on his fiddle, old and young fell into their places for a dance. All down the long kitchen they stood, Mr. and Mrs. Bassett at the top, the twins at the bottom, and then away they went, heeling and toeing, cutting pigeon wings, and taking their steps in a way that would convulse modern children with their newfangled romps called dancing. Mose and Tilly covered themselves with glory by the vigor which they kept it up, till fat Aunt Cynthia fell into a chair, breathlessly declaring that a very little of such exercise was enough for a woman of her heft. Apples and cider, chat and singing finished the evening, and after a grand kissing all round, the guests drove away in the clear moonlight which came out to cheer their long drive. When the jingle of the last bell had died away, Mr. Bassett said soberly as they stood together on the hearth, "Children, we have special cause to be thankful that the sorrow we expected was changed into joy. So we'll read a chapter before we go to bed and give thanks where thanks is due." Then Tilly set out the light stand with the big Bible on it and a candle on each side, and all sat quietly in the firelight, smiling, as they listened with happy hearts to the sweet old words that fit all times and seasons so beautifully. When the good nights were over and the children in bed, Prue put her arm round Tilly and whispered tenderly, for she felt her shake and was sure she was crying, "Don't mind about the old stuffing and pudding, dearie. Nobody cared, and Ma said we really did do surprisingly well for such young girls." The laughter Tilly was trying to smother broke out then and was so infectious Prue could not help joining her. So she went crying, she was laughing, even before she knew the cause of the merriment. "I was mad about the mistakes, but don't care enough to cry. I'm laughing to think how Gad fooled F, and I found him out. I thought Mose and Amos would have died over it when I told them. It was so funny," explained Tilly when she got her breath. "I was so scared that when the first orange hit me, I thought it was a bullet and scrabbled into the cradle as fast as I could. It was real mean to frighten the little ones so," laughed Prue as Tilly gave a growl. "So, did Tilly know?" Is that what she's saying? She said she found him out because she sure did rush into his arms. I don't know. I just said that. Tilly gave a growl. Here a smart rap on the wall with the next room caused a sullen lull in the fun, and Mrs. Bassett's voice was heard saying warmingly, "Girls, go to sleep immediate or you'll wake the baby." "Yes'm," answered two meek voices, and after a few irrepressible giggles, silence reigned, broken only by an occasional snore from the boys or the soft scurry of mice in the buttery taking their part in this old-fashioned Thanksgiving. And that is that. Okay, the next one by Harriet Beecher Stowe. How We Kept Thanksgiving at Oldtown. Little T. This is still from this afternoon. I could have warmed it up, but I didn't. It's still good cold. Okay, how we kept thinking at Oldtown. On the whole, about this time in our life, we were a reasonably happy set of children. The Thanksgiving festival of that year is particularly impressed on my mind as a white day. Are there any of my readers who do not know what Thanksgiving Day is to a child? Then let them go back with me and recall the image of it as we kept it in Oldtown. People have often supposed because the Puritans founded a society where there were no professed public amusements, that therefore there was no fun going on in the ancient land of Israel, and that there were no cakes and ale because they were virtuous. They were never more mistaken in their lives. There was an abundance of sober, well-considered merriment, and the hinges of life were well oiled with that sort of secret humor which to this day gives the raciness to real Yankee wit. Besides this, we must remember that life itself is the greatest possible amusement to people who really believe they can do much with it, who have that intense sense of what can be brought to pass by human effort that was characteristic of the New England colonies. To such it is not exactly proper to say that life is an amusement, but it certainly is an engrossing interest that takes place of all amusements. Our good Puritan fathers intended to form a state of society of such equality of conditions, and to take the means of securing the goods of life so free to all that everybody should find abundant employment for his faculties and a prosperous seeking of his fortunes. Hence, while they forbade theaters, operas, and dances, they made a state of unparalleled peace and prosperity, where one could go to sleep at all hours of day or night with the house door open wide, without bolt or bar, yet without apprehension of any to molest or make afraid. There were, however, some few national fetes. Election Day, when the governor took his seat with pomp and rejoicing, and all the housewives outdid themselves in election cake, 1 or 2 training days, when all the children were refreshed and our military ardor quickened by the roll of drums and the flash of steel, bayonets, and marching and revolutions, sometimes the ending in the sublimest of military operations. A sham fight in which nobody was killed. The 4th of July took high rank after the Declaration of Independence, but the king and high priest of all festivals was the autumn Thanksgiving. When the apples were all gathered, and the cider was all made, and the yellow pumpkins were rolled in from many a hill in billows of gold, and the corn was husked, and the laborers of the season were done, and the warm late days of Indian summer came in, dreary and common still, with just frost enough to crisp the ground of a morning, but with no warm trances of benignant sunny hours at noon, there came over the community a sort of genial repose of spirit, a sense of something accomplished, and of a new golden mark made in advance on the calendar of life. And the deacon began to say that to the minister of a Sunday, "I suppose it's about time for a Thanksgiving proclamation." We also felt its approach in all departments of the household, the conversation at this time beginning to turn on high and solemn culinary mysteries and receipts of wondrous power and virtue, New modes of elaborating squash pies and quince tarts were now oftentimes cheerfully discussed at the evening fireside by Aunt Lois and Aunt Keziah, and notes seriously compared with the experiences of certain other aunties of high repute in such matters. I noticed that on these occasions their voices often fell into mysterious whispers, and that receipts of a special power and sanctity were communicated in tones so low as entirely to escape the vulgar ear. I still remember the solemn shake of the head with which my Aunt Lois conveyed to Miss Mehitable Rossetier the critical properties of mace in relation to its powers of producing in corn fritters a suggestive resemblance to oysters. As ours was an oyster-getting district, and as that charming bivalve was perfectly easy to come at, the interest of such an imitation can be accounted for only by the fondness of the human mind for works of art. For as much as a week beforehand, we children were employed in chopping mince for pies, and that's like, just onions and all that stuff, I reckon. And I told you about mincemeat the other day. For pies to a most wearisome fineness, and in pounding cinnamon, allspice, and cloves in a great lignum mortar. And the sound of this pounding and chopping re-echoed through all the rafters of the old house, with a hearty and vigorous cheer most refreshing to our spirits. In those days there were none of the thousand ameliorations of the labors of housekeeping which have since arisen. No ground and prepared spices and sweet herbs. Everything came into our hands in the rough and in bulk. I have to stop after this. I'm getting sleepy. And the reducing of it into a state for use was deemed one of the appropriate labors of childhood. Even the very salt that we used in cooking was rock salt, which we were required to wash and dry and pound and sift before it became fit for use. And let me read this one last paragraph here. At other times of the year, we sometimes murmured at these labors, but those that were supposed to usher in the great Thanksgiving festival were always entered into with enthusiasm. I hate cataracts. There were signs of richness all around us: stoning of raisins, cutting of citron, slicing of candy orange peel, yet all these were only dawnings and intimations of what was coming during the week of real preparation after the government's proclamation had been read. And I'm going to stop right there. Hope to see you tomorrow. Tea at 3. And Sunday too. For the giveaway. Bye-bye. Love y'all.